The M4 Pro Mac Mini, 5 months later. Do I still love it? Welcome back to the channel. So believe it or not, it's been about 5 actual months now since I picked up the M4 Pro Mac Mini. I actually have the version with 24 gigs of RAM and a 512 gigabyte SSD there. So in this video, what I want to do is I want to go through some of the pros over this last 5 months, then just a few cons, and then tell you if I still love it as much as the day I bought it. So let's just jump into the video. The M4 Pro Mac Mini. Performance. Now, before I get into performance here, just want to say one thing really quickly. I can only tell you how it's performing for me, all right? I'm not creating motion pictures. I'm not a music producer. I'm a normal guy that creates YouTube videos, and I'm just going to tell you exactly how my experience has been with this system for me. All right, one thing to note, and if you've watched my channel before, you may already know this, but I actually had purchased, originally I bought the M4 Mac Mini. I had the 512 gigabyte SSD, but only the 16 gigs of RAM. And then I upgraded to this one, which is the M4 Pro. And this is kind of the base level of the M4 Pro. So I have a good understanding of using both of those, which helps me with this video. So how has this actually been with video editing on my channel here? Now keep in mind a couple things here. I only do videos, when I create my videos, they're in 4K, but I either do 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. Obviously, if you're doing 120, this could be totally different for you. But so far, I usually use about 3 or 4 layers of 4K, usually about 3 layers, some transitions and special effects, but nothing crazy, right? I'm not creating motion pictures. But I've had 0 beach balls, 0 stutters, 0 performance issues, not even anything once noticeable, not a crash, nothing. So far, and I've done probably about 20 to 30 maybe videos on this so far, nothing. It's perfect. So as far as the video, me personally doing video editing, it's been incredible. Now keep a note too that I do not use any proxies. Now I do use CapCut for Mac. It's kind of actually a pretty good editor, but it's actually, a lot of people use it for their phones, but they made one for Mac as well. So keep in mind that that's not even that kind of optimized. So it's doing really well with that. And if I get Final Cut Pro, which is actually more optimized, you're probably going to have better performance even than what I'm getting. So overall, I think it's just really, really good for video editing. But again, it's my scale. I'm not someone that's going to be out there using, 8K red cameras and stuff like that. So it's completely different than some people do. You see, look around me, look at this video, this is what I do, but it works perfectly well for that, even with the 24 gigs of RAM. I did some averages here, so averaging a 10-minute video export with this thing right here, it usually takes about 38% of the time to basically export it. So a 10-minute video would take 3 minutes and 48 seconds. Now that's actually pretty good, right? Now you think it's pretty good, but then when I had the M4, not the M4 Pro, but I had the standard M4 chip, it only took about 42% of the time. So it would be just a couple seconds more, maybe 20 seconds more in each export. So it wasn't a huge difference. So if you're kind of like me, there's not a huge difference between these chips here, between the M4 and the M4 Pro for exactly what I do. It's enough to make it, obviously just for that part exporting, it's enough to make it almost worth it over the course of a lot of videos, but realistically a lot of people won't notice it. It's other things that make kind of a bigger difference. Where the M4 Pro chip shines here, and I have some things written down, it's going to be like transcribing audio, things like that when you're actually in the timeline doing that kind of stuff, removing camera shake, reversing footage that's sometimes difficult for these kind of chips, that kind of stuff. If you actually have a masked object and you want to kind of mask it out during movement, this is going to do really well versus the M4 chip. So the M4 Pro shines in those very specific areas where you're doing, like I said, reversing a clip totally. It has to take a lot of processing power. But beyond that, just the exporting, there's not much of a difference between the M4 Pro and the M4 standard chip, as far as time exporting. But it's the little things that add up, and especially these kind of more crunch things, like I said, transcribing audio and stuff like that on huge files. It's going to make a big difference on the M4. I don't do a lot of that, so for me personally, it hasn't made a huge difference. So with performance, it really comes down to how you actually use it, right? That's what I'm saying. You have to really think about what applications you're going to be using, how you're going to even be using the editing tools, because for someone like me that doesn't do a lot of that stuff, doesn't do a lot of masking, the M4 would have been fine, right? But for other people, and I might grow into it for sure, but the M4 Pro is going to be good for those little specific things. I wanted to save time on the exporting, which I did a little bit, but it's not as big as I thought. But there's other things that this thing's good at, and I'm still happy I bought it, which we're going to talk about. But overall, the experience has been great. It's just that, don't spend the extra money unless you absolutely have to, or if you're making a lot of money back with the job or something, because otherwise it's just not worth it. Okay, RAM. Let's talk about RAM here. So 24 gigs for me, and this is what this has, is plenty. Now let me explain. What I typically do, just for me, I'm going to have CapCut for Mac open. I'm going to have like Photoshop open, maybe Keynote open, maybe 2 or 3 other programs open, and then maybe 20 tabs in Safari open. That's usually my workload that I have all open at once, and I'm only using around 18 gigabytes of memory. So my swap obviously is not being used. I have up to 24 gigabytes on the system with the Pro chip. Now when I had 16, I ran into some other issues. Now maybe it's more perceived because you look at it every once in a while and you see that swap's starting to get used and it gets you a little bit nervous. But realistically, it didn't really hurt me that much. There's a couple instances where it would slow down and I wasn't able to open up a couple extra apps. So like with this thing, with that extra room, if I have a side project going on, I want to burn some time while something's maybe exporting, I can go in and open up a couple more apps with the 24 gigs. That's really what it's buying me. Now, just keep in mind, like the 16 was good for some, good enough for me at least, even though for a lot of you editors out there that do 100 frames per, 120 frames per second and stuff like that, it probably would not be. But for me, it was. But overall, I'm happy with the 24. I think it's a sweet spot, really, for a lot of people out there. And it's something you should think about getting. Even if you're on the base M4 chip, 24 gigs is just really nice to have. Now I did a video right here, I'll put it up here, like how much RAM you should really get for these things. And it's all that was more general. You have to go on a case-by-case basis. And for instance, like if I was actually doing music production on this thing and I had 150 tracks and stuff like that, or, I was doing 3D modeling or anything like that, or, all that kind of stuff, local LLMs, I would definitely need more RAM than 24 gigs. So it's not going to work for those people. But again, you have to just test out your environment and just check your system that you're using now. If you have an older Mac or something, see what the RAM levels you're using, start researching the applications that are online, just jump in and Google's got tons of resources and everyone states how much they're using for each app and stuff like that. So just start researching it. And you'll find out exactly about what you need in each system. And then you just don't spend more than you need. But for any, 24 is definitely not good enough for everyone, just to say. I'm not saying that is going to be good for you just because it is for me. But if you do kind of what I do and you have videos kind of like my videos, I think it will be. Also, another thing to note here that makes a pretty big difference is the M4 Pro here. It has double the memory bandwidth as just the M4 standard Mac Mini, which can be huge here. So what do they say it is? It says memory bandwidth is the speed at which data can be transferred between the CPU, GPU, and other components that utilize shared memory. So that's kind of the definition of it. It allows for faster movement between the components of your computer, obviously, which make your computer overall faster, right? So one thing that's to note here is the actual speed. So this is actually 273 gigabytes per second on the M4 Pro versus only 120, less than half, on the M4 standard Mac Mini over there. So this is going to be a huge difference here. And what they claim here is it's going to really make a difference on tasks that involve large data sets or complex calculations. So if you think about that, data sets or large calculations, if you're doing work that involves that, the memory bandwidth is going to make a huge difference for you. If you're not, you'll never notice it, all right? So if you're doing email, watching YouTube, and just watching Zoom calls, stuff like that, you're never going to notice it. But for other people, it might be massive. And that's what you have to understand, is it's all individualized to who you are. Now, browsing the web is also ultra fast in this thing right here. I went ahead and did at least one test here called Speedometer 3.1. It's the newest test here. On Safari, I was able to get a 48 number there, which is actually really good. You can see it right here. And then on Chrome, it was slightly faster for some reason. It was actually 49. And this test basically, it measures, what it says is this test measures how navigating the web and other things will be very fast. So it's going to be navigating the web. I mean, how fast it can load, like, Java on pages and stuff like that. So it's going to make a big difference, but this is a really high score. Now, I didn't test the M4 because I don't have it any longer, but it's obviously a little bit slower, but they're very close, actually, to believe it or not, because they share single core speeds that are really high, and this is going to be really a single core task there. But compared to other computers, these things rock as far as, speedometer tests and stuff like that. Just test 3.1, not 3.0. That's the newest test. All right, SSDs. Let's talk about SSDs. Now, to be completely honest, they're super ultra fast here. So I'm going to do a Blackmagic test right here. And before I do that, though, remember just a couple years ago, 500 megabytes per second was a really fast connection, or really fast SSD, I'm sorry, not connection. And, the speeds were incredible back then, and people were so happy about SSDs coming to the market, the 2.5-inch SSDs and stuff. Well, look at the test here. This is going to be around 4,400 writes, somewhere in there, and 5,100 reads. And it's very, very quick. Now, keep in mind that the M4 Pro chip here is usually a little bit, almost sometimes double the speed of just the M4 Mac Mini. So the M4 Mac Mini is going to be like in the 2,500s. And this one, again, is 4,400 on the writes and around 5,100 on the reads. And there's no reason why you need an SSD, in my opinion. This is just just my personal opinion, any faster than that right now. I know people like to have them faster, but realistically, it's lightning fast, and there's no need for anything more. If you go with the larger SSD in here, though, like a 1 terabyte or a 2 terabyte, that'll actually go up to around 6,000 megabytes per second. So you can get faster if you want it, but you're going to be paying for it. Now, the one thing I do recommend is really the main difference is when you go with the M4, like I said, the M4 standard Mac Mini, you get the smaller hard drive, and that's going to be the slower speed, half of this speed. Now, I recommend, even if you get the smaller one or the M4 chip, not the M4 Pro, get at least 512 gigabytes. I've noticed on this just by using it that I'm not really worried too much about it. I do my projects and then I offload them later, and I have enough room on there where I'm not worried about, my SSD filling up all the time. Now, I have 256 on this system right here. This is going to be an iMac, obviously, and I'm always worried about this thing. It's always right on the edge, and you're always trying to move things around and have everything offloaded. It's just a lot of stress on you that you don't need. So I know $200 is a lot of money. We are getting screwed by Apple. I totally understand that. And at the end of the day, I would recommend paying it to go up to 512. Though it just makes life easier for every single thing you do. Gives you the room you want in there. So whether the speed, even the speed, like I said, of just the standard M4 is fast enough at 2,500 megabytes per second. And this is over 5,000. I think it's more the space that's going to make a bigger problem for you than the speeds there. I think it's the space that you want. So definitely go with the 512. Okay, just from my experience though so far and for what I do on my channel, let's just wrap up the whole performance thing with what we just talked about. It's phenomenal for me. Things like gaming, like I noticed when I have the M4 Pro here, and then I had basically the M4 before, the Mac Minis here. When I did some basic games out there, and there's not a ton for Apple, obviously, but I was able to get anywhere from 20% faster with the M4 Pro up to 100% faster frame rates with this system versus the standard M4. So if you're a gamer, that's one reason why you want to get the M4 Pro over the M4. If you like games and you want that extra, frames per second. But if you like one specific game, just check online to see what the differences are because I usually record them. Some games, there's almost no difference, a little bit of a difference. Other games, it's just massive, like 100% difference, like 70 frames to 140 frames per second, just by going with the Pro chip. That is because this actually has 6 more GPU cores. It's obviously quite a bit faster as well as far as, the CPU. But overall, I think, if you're a gamer, this is the one you want to get versus the standard one. But the performance for me is I have not worried about it once. And, would I get the max? Do I need a max? I know you can't get it on this, but would I need it, on a laptop or something? Or if you want to get the studio, me personally, for what I do and everything around me, no way. I would not need it right now. Maybe in the future, but as of right now, the Pro is all I need. It's just going to be the memory and the SSD size really that makes a little bit more of a difference for me. Okay, thermals and noise, all right? Now, one thing I can say is based on just my personal experience having the M4 and the M4 Pro now, all of the thermals and all of the noise to me so far have been almost exactly the same. I know a lot of people are complaining that this thing over here with the M4 Pro is a lot louder, it's being way louder and stuff like that. Obviously in this one, we have it tilted this way so the fan's in here. But overall, I barely ever hear the thing. In fact, it really comes down to when you, again, do really, really heavy lifting. Even when I'm exporting 4K video, I've never heard this thing except one time. One time I had to pick it up to my ear like this, and I could actually hear it going, but normally I just don't hear it at all. So people complain about it. Now that's if you're doing something crazy with this thing. Again, people do crazy things with this thing, maybe massive data sets and having it running for an hour or something like that, but I personally don't do that. So it really depends on what you're doing there. The heat of it as well. So when you actually talk about heat, I haven't tested the actual internal thermals on this because it hasn't gotten hot enough for me to actually want to do that on both the M4 and the M4 Pro. Again, people have complained that the M4 Pro gets really hot, and I'm guessing it could. But when I export 4K videos, I feel it all the time. I'm constantly touching it and feeling it just to see. And just think like maybe a heated blanket versus a hot frying pan. It feels like a heated blanket a lot of times. In fact, even when it's plugged in sometimes, that's what it feels like. Even without this whole contraption around it, right? When it's just standard, that I always felt it. But when you're actually doing some maybe heavy lifting, it's going to get just maybe a little bit. But I've never had it like where I had to move my hand away or I felt kind of scared that something was going to burn up. Never. Now, again, it comes down to what you're doing. But for me, in this specific environment, if this is what you do, you don't worry about it. I have not heard it yet, and there's other louder things around me which may be blended out or something, but I just have never heard it spin up. Okay, let's talk about ports now. So the ports on this thing, how have they been for me? I would say that they're perfect, except obviously I'm using this kind of hub here, which is actually, I did a video on this Acasis hub right here. If you guys want to check it out, I'll put it right here. Really cool hub because it comes with an additional, I'll get into the additional ports in a second, and we'll get through that in a second. But overall, just with the Mac Mini in general, I think the ports are fine. The one thing I do want to say is you don't really need Thunderbolt 5, all right? Coming from someone that owns a lot of Macs, Thunderbolt 4 is fast enough for just about everything you're going to do. If you're going to edit off an external drive, it's perfectly fine on Thunderbolt 4. Thunderbolt 5 is a luxury. Now, when I say this, I mean getting 5 or 6,000 megabytes per second on an external SSD is nice, but getting 3,500 on Thunderbolt 4 is just as good to me for my workloads. I've edited off both of them. I noticed no difference whatsoever. So really, the Thunderbolt 5 could be maybe like a future-proofing if they come out with a studio display that's 32 inches and you need more bandwidth and you have to have that plug to use it. Maybe you'll later on you might get screwed if you don't buy this. I don't know. I don't want to tell you not to, but I just, for people that are on, if that's the main decision process, I need 5,500, 6,000 megabytes per second on my external SSDs, you don't, all right? Unless you're doing something where you specifically know you do, you don't. At least that's my opinion only. So I just want to kind of state that right off the bat. And then everything else has worked flawlessly on this thing. I love the two, USB in the front, the headphone jack in the front's been good for me personally because I use headphones. I don't use speakers. And this actually, so I got this case though from Acasis, and it really fixed a lot of my problems. There's a lot of cases like this, and you can see here, what it does is it adds a couple display ports on the back. Pretty standard stuff back there. But it really adds the SD card readers up here on top, and then also over here on the front, it gives you 3 USB-A at 10 gigabit per second as well. And so it adds a lot of functionality. But the kicker on this thing is it adds capability to add 2 M.2 SSDs to your Mac Mini internally here, and you can run them in RAID 0 or RAID 1. I have them in RAID 0, and you can actually have up to 2 8 terabyte, basically M.2s in RAID 0, which means you add those together, 16 terabytes you can add into here, which is crazy. 16 terabytes at around, when you rate them in RAID 0, it's about, I think, around 2,850 megabytes per second, which is pretty crazy, right? So almost 3,000 megabytes per second, and it's a RAID 0, basically. So this is what I recommend doing. Is some people say they don't like the look of this and stuff, and I, it's all subjective, right? It looks like one of these like Mac Pros and stuff like that. But overall, I think, if you're thinking about buying something where you just want the extra ports and stuff, I mean, this thing was like on sale for like $100 extra. It was like $100. I think it went up to like 150 now, but it's totally worth it to me. And I don't think I'm ever going to take it out of this thing because even though I don't maybe like the look of it as much as before, I got every single thing I need on this thing. And, who needs more, right? I'm set for a long time with this, and it kind of protects it as well. So it's pretty nice. The only thing is, obviously, I worried about the heat of this thing sometimes, but so far it's stayed about the exact same temperature to the touch everywhere, and I haven't really worried about it. Okay, so over the last 5 months, what are the only cons that I've actually seen here? There hasn't been a lot of them. Now, I can't really say this is going to be because of I've been using it, but obviously the upgrade cost in the beginning, this is from the beginning, that was a huge con. I mean, I think if it was half that, $100 per upgrade instead of 200, Apple just really likes to shove it to you and those type of things, and I think that's not really fair to a lot of people, but overall, it is what it is, right? We can't complain about that now. I already bought the thing. The only issue that I've really had, we've talked about this before, is if you're using if you're using Wi-Fi, all right? If I have nothing around this, no case on it like this, I have it completely empty, I have no other stuff around me, no mice or anything, I'm still going to lose a little bit. It seems like, well, compared to my other Macs in here, I'm going to lose like 30%, on the Wi-Fi for some reason. It's 30% slower than my other Macs for some reason. Now, I have a lot like 300 or 400 megabytes per second Wi-Fi, so it doesn't really affect me that much, but I notice it. But as soon as you start introducing anything around this thing, now the reason I'm blaming the Mac Mini for this is because it just has really bad shielding. So anything that you put in front of the bottom of that plastic over here is going to cause an issue. It's going to make your Wi-Fi go down. If you have Ethernet, it's not a big deal, right? But if you don't have Ethernet, it's going to make it go down. So if I add, if I plug in an SSD drive into this, an external one, and put it over here, then it's going to go down a little bit more and a little bit more. And ultimately, you run into some issues where, I'm noticing some stuff. I'll talk about that. But I mean, generally, if you have Ethernet, like I said, it's best to do that or use like a power line coming into your power cable and run it into here through the Ethernet port. That's probably the best way to do it. But if you can't do that, just expect that this is not going to be the best with Wi-Fi compared to other systems. Just my experience only. I've talked to a lot of people with the same problems. I've talked to a smaller percentage without the same problem. It depends on your office and your walls and everything else and your positioning of the system. A lot of factors go into this, but overall, that's going to be the case here. Really bad shielding, I think, that they made into this. I mean, as bad as it could be. I mean, it's hard to say if it's bad or if there's just no way around it. I don't know. But I just wanted people to note that it's there, and you got to really think about what you're putting around it. It can affect Wi-Fi. And then the other thing I noticed too, and it's really the only thing, is some bugginess, all right? So, and I'm not sure what's going on. So for instance, when I actually launch YouTube sometimes, a video will start playing and it'll play like 10 seconds, stop, and then reset itself and start playing again. And it's never happened on any of my other Macs. I'm using the exact same Safari, the exact same OS, everything's the same. Never even seen it once, but with this Mac Mini, it's happened a couple times. Other apps have done similar stuff to that. I'm not sure what's going on with it. I don't know how I can blame it for it because it doesn't seem like it could be possible that it would be the system, but I'm just telling you that I've had some kind of little bugginess here and there, and I'm trying to figure it out. If I do, I'll have to repost here. But that's about it. So out of all of the cons here, I mean, so far for the cost I paid, I mean, I got this at Micro Center for like $1,100. This is the Pro version again. I can't complain with it. I've saved a ton of time as far as my edits and stuff like that over the course of, a couple months here. And I think, eventually at the course of maybe a year, I'll make all that money back versus this, just buying the standard version. So I don't know. I think, it's just a great system overall. I think if you're on the edge, if you do any video editing or if you just want to future-proof it, definitely the Pro is a good idea. But really, before even the Pro, upgrade the RAM and upgrade the storage a little bit. And I think you're going to be better off that way than even going with the faster chip, in my opinion. But if you're someone like me, you do video editing and you do it almost for kind of a living and stuff, then this is the one probably to get. And then you still think about the RAM. I got kind of the bare minimum RAM for like a video editor, but it's been fine because I've been using 18 usually, somewhere in that range. And I've heard a lot of people doing the same thing. All right, we're going to wrap this up. I hope you guys like these videos. This one went a little bit long. Sometimes I rant on stuff, but I just like to talk to people as if I'm just a normal Mac user, right? And that's what I am. I don't get invited to any Apple events or anything like that. But I still love the thing after 5 months, and it's still my main editing system. And it will be for a long time until the next one comes out and I have to review it, right? But anyways, we'll talk to you guys in the next one. I hope everyone's having a great week. Peace.